Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, with the new ban list for the TCG, I wanted to talk about not just one, but two tier lists. Most notably, the tier list for the TCG, and then we're also going to quickly talk about the World's tier list as well. And we're going to talk real quick about the ban list for that as well. That'll be next. We're just going to real quickly go over the top decks for the TCG thanks to the new ban list. Things that are of note, I've already talked about the ban list, but things that are of note, SnowiKs got hit, Fiendsmith got hit, Grass is now back, Gimmick Puppet has a weaker FTK, but they still can FTK, and that's pretty much it. Basically nothing else of note from that. I guess skill drain got put to 1, but other than that, not really that big of a deal. So here we have tier 1, 2, 3, and Rogue, and then everything else. And yeah, basically everything is going to go into those slots. Tier 1 is going to take up a large percentage of the top cut, that being like 15 to 20%. Tier 2 is a decent amount, right? 10 to 5%, right? Of a top cut. Tier 3 is kind of expecting to be in top cut, at least in some regard. Rogue is then bubbling / maybe one every few events where you get it into the top cut, and everything else is basically non-existent. So yeah, let's just quickly hop into this. Starting off here, this is just in alphabetical order, so starting off with Branded, which I believe is a solid tier 3 representative. I expect it to be in most top cuts, at least in one capacity or another, because, yeah, generally it is still a fairly decent deck. While it did lose access to Branded Fusion at 3, I think ultimately that doesn't really matter too much, as we've seen with both the OCG and Master Duel. It's not really that big of a deal. They can still more or less do whatever they want, right? Until Sanctifier Dragon is banned, I think that Branded is basically going to be able to do whatever it wants. Until that point. So, for the most part, I don't think this changes much, and Branded's still pretty good. Now, Centurion has yet to receive the new support, which does matter for the deck. That makes the deck less consistent and less powerful overall. So, as of right now, I think Centurion is just Rogue. I don't think it's all that great, and yeah, we're going to keep it there. In the OCG, it's doing fairly well and is like the 3rd best deck, which is kind of funny, but as of right now, not really. Chimera Fiendsmith, I don't think is honestly all that good. I'm actually just going to put in everything else. Yes, Fiendsmith is very good, but due to the hits of Fiendsmith, I think realistically any other Fiendsmith variant just loses quite a bit. So there you go. Next up we have Dragonlink. Again, not very good. Don't expect it to really show up. Drytron, I think, is a rogue deck that can have some tops here and there with the new support and stuff like that. Honestly, I'm actually going to put this in tier 3. Drytron is actually a fairly competent deck at this point, mostly due to the fact that it gains a lot more consistency with the with Ava coming back to 1. Ava coming back to 1 kind of doesn't matter, but more specifically with the limitations, or not the limitations, the changes to the way that the deck now functions, going into more of the more of their own boss monsters and stuff like that, having more consistency, etc., etc. I think it's still very good. Its biggest issue is like Bestials, but overall I don't think a lot of people are playing a lot of Bestials. I think it's a pretty minimal amount of Bestials, and I think because of that they're still able to kind of do stuff. And again, the new support does help it quite a bit. We're going to talk about Snake Eye later when we talk about Fiendsmith Snake Eye, which is there. So we'll talk about that later. Flunder, I still think is fairly decent, and has potential to do pretty well, but not expecting it to do exceptional. Just has like some top. Actually, I'm going to put this in Rogue. It hasn't really topped all that recently, so there's that. Next up, we have Gimmick Puppet. Gimmick Puppet still has the FTK. Yes, technically, some of the limitations do help or hinder, but there has still been an FTK due to Grinder Golem, and you can still do it with the 1 field spell. So honestly, not that big of a change, all things considered. The only thing that this does change is that if they don't draw the field spell, the FTK is a lot less likely. So that's kind of it, but other than that, not really much of a change. Ice Barrier is just bad. Infernoid is just bad. Kashira could potentially see some play here or there, but for the most part, this is not a great deck. yeah, that's pretty much it. Lab has some decent representation, and I think is still fairly good. I think it's kind of on the cusp there. I don't really want to put it in tier 2. It's had some pretty lackluster results as of late, even with the Fiendsmith stuff. Or as of the Fiendsmith stuff being released. And I think that, honestly, Lab just isn't really in a good position right now. More specifically because of, like, best of 3s rather than anything else. So, there you go. Melodious, I think, is the first tier 2 deck that we're going to actually talk about. Melodious has a lot of good things going for it. Mostly the fact that it didn't lose anything on the ban list, which is great. It has the ability to play a very solid game with some very strong end boards and some very solid hand traps and stuff like that. And I think hand traps now are going to matter a lot more and be more impactful due to the limitations of Snake Eye. Next up, we have Memento. Memento, I think, is a solid tier 2 strategy with the new cards. Makes it just very solid. Pendulum is not really realistically a deck. Same thing with Plant Link. Honestly, I want to put this in everything else, but there's always that one player that shows up and just claps with it. Pearly has decent playability. Even with the heavy limitations that it has, I still think it's playable. Rescue Ace is pretty bad at the moment. Don't really see it doing all that well, but it could potentially show up. It has the potential to. I think most people, if they're playing, like, if they would have played Rescue Ace, they're just going to play Snake Eye at this point. So I think for the most part, it's just that players aren't necessarily playing Rescue Ace. But I still think that it has power. Ritual Beast, I think, is a solid tier 2 option, if not probably the premier tier 2 option in the current metagame. Runic Fur Hire is just not very good. I'm going to actually put this in everything else. I think that the Fur Hire stuff just has kind of lost its value, mostly due to the fact that the end boards that people are putting up now really require you to play hand traps. So the runic stuff being that supplement for the hand traps really does hurt for hire. Or basically any runic variant, except for runic stun, which I think is a solid option, and we will continue to see runic stun, or more specifically just stun in general, as a tier 3 option. Because stun is still good, even though, yes, skill drain did get limited. I don't think it matters. There's so many stun options that realistically it doesn't matter. Salamangreat is an option that exists and will probably continue to see play. Honestly, it might be tier 3, but yeah, we'll put it there. Also, Branded should probably go up. Next up, we do have Snake Eye, which I do believe Fiendsmith Snake Eye is still extremely good, right? Not much has changed, all things considered, when it comes to Snake Eye, right? It does kind of suck. Honestly, this is one of the biggest issues that I've had with the ban list, is that it doesn't really change the top decks all that much. However, I do think that it is much more beatable, right? A singular hand trap now matters a lot more. Your opponent is a lot more likely to draw dead hands, mostly due to the fact that Poplar is at 1, so if they draw Poplar, that basically has to be their normal summon, or they're not getting Poplar's effect, which I think does matter quite significantly. Fire King Snake Eye, I think, is also fairly decent. It actually gets a lot better due to the limitations of the Snake Eye stuff, mostly just due to the fact that playing like a pure Snake Eye variant just isn't as valuable. So there's that. Sprite, I think, is a bit slept on. I think it does have a lot of potential here, but I am going to put it in Rogue. I just don't think people are going to realistically be playing it, and yeah, there's that. Tier still has some decent options. I'm going to put it in Tier 2. Lots of solid end boards and the like. Playing the Horus cards gives it that extra access. Actually, no, I'm going to move this down. I don't think it's that good, but it still does have quite a bit of play left in it. Next up, we have Tenpai. Tenpai did lose to Songen Summoning, and that doesn't matter because it's getting new support, so realistically, it's a pretty equal trade, all things considered. So, yeah, it's still a really strong deck. However, it's not the best deck as of yet. So there's that. Unchained Fiendsmith is a deck that exists, and realistically, I don't know how well this is going to do, so I'm going to put it in everything else, and if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. And then we have Vanquish Soul, which is, maybe it'll show up. We have Voice's Voice, which I honestly am going to put in Tier 2. I think that is a solid option, just genuinely. It has a lot of really strong cards just in general, and it has a much stronger end board now, mostly due to the fact that I think hand traps in particular are going to get they're going to be like less impactful, right? And while hand traps are pretty decent against Voiceless Voice, I think that the end board itself is now a lot stronger just due to the lack of consistency some of the other decks have. So I think it's going to kind of shoot up in prio. So there's that. Next up we have Yubel, which is still not better than Fire King, or still not better than Snake Eye, but is still good, right? We still have access to Triple D, Bellstar, Triple Wanted, so for the Snake Eye stuff, they're still going to do that. But Yubel still can do like Fiendsmith stuff and be fairly decent. Then we have the White Forest stuff, which is okay. And that's basically it for the TCG. I don't really think much is changing, honestly. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think it's just that more decks are likely to be able to top now, outside of just Fire King, Snake Eye, or sorry, Snake Eye and Tenpai. So that's basically it, though. But yeah, let's hop into the Worlds discussion. Okay, so here we have the ban list for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, or not Master Duel, the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG Worlds ban list, the collective ban list, right? Which a lot of these cards on here are things that are basically not in the game, right? So Tistina's not in all of the formats, right? So we have the OCG, we have the TCG, and then we have the China format. So a lot of this stuff is missing in one of those formats, right? As of note, there's not too much to really, like, there's not a whole lot of note that is currently missing from any particular format. I think the biggest thing is Pit Knight Philly, which is like a decent card at the very least, right? So there's that. However, when it comes to limitations and bans, I think this is where things become a little bit more interesting, right? Notable bans include, obviously, Maxi, Mathmech Circular, right? Fairy Tale Snow, which is banned in the TCG. A lot of the, like, Cannon Soldier shenanigans that are just kind of like FTK enablers, right? Artifact Scythe, which is banned in the TCG, which might also be banned elsewhere. Fairy Tale Snow is banned. Did I say that? Anyway, both Substitute and Totally Awesome are banned. Master Plan is banned. Ronin Totem is banned. Sorry, not Substitute. Ronin Totem was the one I wanted to talk about. Since this is also prior to the most recent ban list for the TCG, things like Plushfire are still banned as well. Wandering Griffin Rider is a notable ban for the Adventure Engine, so that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, Baron and Borlode Savage, as those are banned in the TCG, along with Kit Kalos. That's all banned. So, yeah, stuff like that. Then you also have, you know, Link Karibo, Samorg, right? A few things here or there that are also banned. Curious. Lots of spells that you kind of expect, right? Also things that are like time cards, like Mystic Walk and, where is it? Try and Guess. Where is it? Rainbow Life. Bunch of like side deck cards for time, which are banned, right? So, a bunch of silly things like that. Limitations, I think, is where things get interesting, because Arch Nemesis Protoss, notably, is limited, which means that it is playable. So things like Ritual Beast are still going to be able to utilize that and search out cards. That's something of note. Miscellaneous Saurus is limited, right? Even though it's at 3, I believe, in the TCG. Also notably, Speedroid Terratop is limited. The Sprites, both blue and jet, also limited. Every single one of the tier limit cards are limited as well. And then, of course, the Bestials are also all limited, except for Saronir. I think Saronir is the only one that's at 3, but every other Bestial is at 1, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Baldrake, Druidus, and Magnemite are all at 1. So there's that. Other notable inclusions: the Plant Link stuff, Striker Dragon, SP Little Knight, Gimmick Puppet of Strings, not the C, the Chaos number 40, but specifically just the regular one, which again doesn't stop the FTK. Beatrice is still at 1, not yet banned, right? So that's also notable. Yeah, that's pretty much it there. Obviously, Branded Fusion, Branded Opening, Called by the Grave is at 1, and Crossout Designator also at 1. Called by the Grave is at 1 in the TCG, Crossout Designator is at 1 in the OCG. Put them together, not a lot to do in terms of hand traps, which is pretty cool. Yeah, not too much else of note from here. I guess starter is kind of notable. Also, terraforming is still at 1, so there's that. Oh, here we go. Wanted at 1. Also, Pearly Sleepy Memory. That's something to note as well. And then a whole bunch of floodgates as well here. Teekboo Rivalry goes in, Anti-Spell, Skill Drain, all that one. Coolio. Moving on to the semi-limits is kind of, there's only a few things. Avatar Kieran at 2, Bonfire at 2, My Friend Pearly at 2, and the Big Welcome at 2. So minor hits to some of the other decks like Labyrinth. There you go. Now, if you want to check out the full list, you can go to the Worlds page for Yu-Gi-Oh. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and check out the finals rules for the trading card game. Scroll down and check the ban list. You can also check out all the duel lists that made it. Hip hip hooray. There you go. There they all are. Yeah. But there you go. You have all of them right here. So shout outs to all of them. Here's Master Duel. You can see all of the teams as well. There you go. Anyway, there's that. Moving on to the actual tier list. It's the same tier. It's the same decks, right? Because honestly, not much has changed, right? So I'm going to do this really quick. Okay? As I said, not much has changed. Branded's still good. Centurion's actually pretty bad. Don't have the new support. Chimera Fiendsmith, also not very good. Just in general. I'll put it in Rogue. Dragon Link's not great. Drytron doesn't have the new support. I believe... Actually, no, I do think it gets the new support. So it could potentially do something there. Anyway, Snake Eye, especially Fiendsmith, or Fire... no, actually, Fiendsmith is probably still better. But yeah, the limitations to Snake Eye are 1 Snake Eye Ash, which I didn't mention previously, but that is on the ban list. It's 1 Snake Eye Ash, because it's currently limited to 1 in the OCG, 2 Bonfire, and 1 Wanted. That's it. That's the limitations, right? So, all in all, yes, they don't have Baron, yes, they don't have Link Karibo, and yes, they don't have Borreload Savage, but we saw that did pretty much nothing for the Snake Eye engine in the TCG. So, hard to really say that, like, it's going to matter here. There you go. Flunder, I think, has options. Gimmick Puppet, I think, has options. Actually, Gimmick Puppet is still, like, fairly decent. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, notably, I took away the tier 3. Reason being, I think it doesn't matter as much if there is a deck that could potentially top, because it only goes to top 8 in the... at Worlds, right? So it's Swiss into top 8, which I think just does kind of cut things. I think realistically, you're probably only going to play tier 1 and tier 2 decks, so there's that. Ice Barrier is not very good. Kashtira is unplayable. No Fenrir, 1 Unicorn, and no Arise Heart. There's no reason to play Cash. Cash is dead on arrival. Labyrinth, I think, has more potential in at Worlds here, just due to a slightly, ever so slightly, smaller power level of the metagame. Speaking of smaller power levels, or lower power levels, Tenpai still has the same limitations that it would have in the TCG, which is the 1 Song and Summoning, and that's it. That's the only change that actually happened. So there's that. Melodious is still slightly playable, however, I think it's a little bit it's okay. Memento, also pretty decent in terms of an option. Pendulum don't have Electromite, so that's not real. Pearly is basically unplayable. Also, Pearly had another semi-limited card, if I'm not mistaken. Both Delicious Memory and My Friend are semi'd. So, there's that. Rescue Ace is kind of playable. Ritual Beast, I think, is a decently good option here. Not really playable. Maybe playable, but probably not really a good option. Salomon Great's potentially playable. Sprite is totally unplayable. Tyr is totally unplayable. Unchained has 1 Charvara, and realistically is... I don't know. You could potentially do it. Same thing with Vanquish. Voiceless Voice is probably tier 2 as well. White Forest is also pretty much tier 2. And then Ubel is Honestly, 10-5 is probably a little bit better than Ubel here. But yeah, there you go. Honestly, not much has changed. This is basically just the same thing as the TCG tier list with some minor changes here or there. Labyrinth going up, Whitewoods going up, stuff like that. And you might be wondering why I put the White Forest cards up a little bit more here. The main reason for that is due to the fact that I think with the minor limitations mattering a lot more, like the minor changes to consistency for like Snake Eye and stuff like that, I think it does kind of help the White Forest stuff. I wouldn't have put them like too much lower. Same thing with Lab. I think overall, like the power level of the decks do kind of drop, right? I believe Gamma is like limited to 1 and a bunch of stuff like that, where it's like just overall due to like specific hand trap limitations and generic cards and stuff like that being either unplayable due to them not being released in specific regions or what have you. That just overall, I think some of the other decks do kind of shift around, not too much, right? Like you know, Labyrinth and Whitewoods or White Forest are kind of the only 2 decks that I moved up, but realistically, yeah, it's pretty much the same stuff that you would expect. But yeah, that's going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy. If you did, like us very much, appreciate it, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye bye. Shout out to the Frost Guard, my members. Thank you guys so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy the content.